The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction. Its walls carved from living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. And today, it was filled with the representatives of 947 spacefaring civilizations. All of them gathered for the Centennial Review of Developing Species. Ambassador Valith of the Serene Collective rose from her hovering platform, her forearms folded in the traditional posture of academic superiority, and her scales shimmered with amusement as she activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. "Fellow delegates," she announced, her translator converting her whistling language into the common tongue. "I present to you the latest assessment of species 7291, known locally as humanity." The hologram flickered to life, showing a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star at the edge of the galaxy's spiral arm. And scattered laughter rippled through the assembly as the first images appeared. "As you can see," Valith continued, "these creatures have been under observation for approximately 300 standard cycles. And in that time they have achieved what can only be described as the absolute minimum requirements for pre-spacefaring classification." She gestured, and the hologram zoomed in to show human cities. Their towers of glass and steel, looking almost quaint compared to the organic megastructures favored by the elder races. "They still burn chemical fuels for energy," Valith said, and the Kethmari delegate made a sound of disbelief. "They have not unified their planetary government, and most remarkably, they continue to resolve disputes through physical violence." The chamber erupted with sounds of mirth from 100 different species. And even the normally stoic Relian observers allowed their face tentacles to ripple with amusement. "But the true entertainment," Valith said, savoring the moment, "comes from their attempts at military technology." The hologram shifted to show human warships, metal vessels covered in sensor arrays and weapon ports, propelled by chemical rockets that left trails of fire in their wake. "These," Valith announced with barely concealed delight, "are what humanity calls battleships." The laughter grew louder, and the Kethmari delegate leaned forward on his platform, his massive frame shaking with amusement. "They throw metal pellets at each other," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "I have not seen such primitive warfare since my species crawled from the mud pools 60 million years ago." Elder Vorn of the Ascended Collective, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, flickered with what might have been pity. "Perhaps we should not mock them so harshly," he suggested, his voice resonating directly in the minds of all present. "After all, we too were young once. And every species must begin somewhere." "Begin somewhere, yes," Valith agreed. "But these creatures seem determined to destroy themselves before they ever reach the stars. And our projections suggest they will either extinct themselves through environmental collapse or nuclear warfare within the next 2 centuries. She closed the holographic display with a dismissive wave. "I recommend we maintain observation protocols and prepare a salvage assessment for when the inevitable occurs, as the planet itself may have some value once the natives are gone." The motion passed without opposition, and humanity's file was archived alongside thousands of other primitive species deemed unworthy of contact. None of them noticed the small anomaly in the observation data, a heat signature beneath the southern ice cap that had been steadily growing for the past decade. 12,000 light-years away, Dr. Alana Vasquez stood in a tent that offered little protection against the Antarctic cold, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air as she stared at the images spread across the table before her. "This is impossible," she whispered. Though she had said those words so many times in the past 3 years that they had lost all meaning. General Morrison stood beside her, his military uniform looking absurdly out of place in the research station. But the gravity of what they had found demanded the highest levels of authority. "Impossible or not," Morrison said, It is real, and we need to decide what to do about it. The images showed a chamber carved from ice and stone, its walls covered in symbols that glowed with faint golden light. And at the center of that chamber sat a vessel unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. It was enormous, their estimates suggested it. Stretched for over 12 kilometers from bow to stern, and its surface was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. The carbon dating came back, Elena said, her voice barely steady, and the results make no sense at all. How old? Morrison asked. 4.7 billion years, Elena answered. Which means it was here before the Earth had finished forming, before life had emerged. Before everything? Morrison was silent for a long moment. That is older than the solar system itself. I know, Elena said. And there's something else, something that makes even less sense. She pulled out another photograph. This one, showing a section of the chamber wall covered in carved symbols. These markings, she said. Our linguists have been studying them for months, and they have found something disturbing. What? The language shares structural roots with Proto-Indo-European, Elena said, the ancestor of most modern human languages. And this should be impossible because Proto-Indo-European only emerged around 6,000 years ago. Morrison stared at her. You are saying that whoever built this ship spoke a language related to ours. I am saying that whoever built this ship may have been related to us, Elena corrected. And I am saying that everything we thought we knew about human history might be wrong. Before Morrison could respond, one of the research assistants burst into the tent, his face pale with excitement and fear. Dr. Vasquez, he gasped. You need to come to the main chamber right now, because something is happening. They ran through the tunnels that had been carved through the ancient ice, past security checkpoints manned by soldiers who looked increasingly nervous, until they reached the observation platform overlooking the buried vessel. The ship was glowing. Golden light pulsed along its surface in rhythmic patterns, and the geometric symbols carved into its hull had begun to move, rearranging themselves into new configurations that seemed to follow some ancient and incomprehensible logic. It started 10 minutes ago, the assistant said. And the readings are off every scale we have. Elena stepped closer to the railing, her heart pounding in her chest, and as she watched, a section of the ship's hull began to open. Light spilled out from within, warm and golden and somehow welcoming, and a voice emerged from the opening, speaking in perfect English with an accent that belonged to no nation on earth. Children of the progenitors, the voice said, you have finally come, and your inheritance awaits. Elena Vasquez looked at General Morrison, and in that moment, both of them understood that nothing would ever be the same again. The galaxy had called humanity primitive, but the galaxy did not know what slept beneath the ice. It was about to find out. Elena Vasquez walked through the opening in the ancient hull with her heart beating so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. And the light that surrounded her was warm like sunlight on a summer afternoon. Nothing like the frozen wasteland she had left behind. The interior of the ship defied everything she understood about architecture and engineering, with corridors that seemed to curve in directions that should not exist, and walls that displayed images of stars and galaxies she did not recognize. Please continue forward, the voice said, gentle and patient. The command chamber is not far, and there is much to discuss. General Morrison walked beside her, his hand resting on his sidearm, though both of them knew that no weapon they possessed could possibly matter here. And behind them came a small team of scientists and soldiers, all of them silent with awe. The corridor opened into a vast circular chamber, and at its center sat a throne made of crystal that glowed with the same golden light that filled the ship. And hovering above the throne was a figure made of light itself. It appeared human, a woman with flowing hair and kind eyes, but her form flickered and shifted like a flame in gentle wind. "Welcome," the figure said. "I am the Vigil, the guiding intelligence of this vessel, and I have waited for this moment for a very long time." Elena found her voice somehow. "What is this place?" she asked. "And what do you mean by children of the progenitors?" The Vigil smiled, and the expression held both joy and ancient sadness. "This vessel is called Prometheus in the tongue you would understand," she explained. "And it is a dreadnought-class warship of the Terran progenitor fleet, built to protect and serve humanity across all the ages of the universe." "Terran progenitors," Morrison repeated. "You are saying that humans built this ship?" "Not humans as you know yourselves," the Vigil said, "but your ancestors, the original children of Earth, who rose to greatness billions of years before your current civilization began." The air in the chambers seemed to grow heavier as the Vigil continued her explanation. "Long ago, before the sun had finished forming, a civilization arose on a world that would one day become Earth. And they called themselves the progenitors because they knew that they were the first of their kind in all the cosmos. Images appeared around them, cities of impossible beauty, ships that sailed between stars like birds through air, beings that looked almost but not quite human, walking through gardens of crystal and light. They spread across the galaxy," the Vigil said, "and they found that they were alone in the universe, the first intelligent species to ever emerge. And they took upon themselves the sacred duty of seeding life wherever they went." "The other alien species," Elena whispered. "The ones watching us. They are all children of the progenitors," the Vigil confirmed. "Uplifted from primitive stock and given the gift of intelligence, then left to develop in their own ways while the progenitors watched from afar." General Morrison stepped forward. "If these progenitors were so powerful, where are they now? And why did they leave this ship behind?" The Vigil's expression grew grave. "Because they faced an enemy that even they could not defeat alone." The images shifted, showing something that made Elena's stomach turn with instinctive horror shapes of pure darkness drifting through the void between galaxies, consuming light and matter and meaning itself. "The hollow," the Vigil said. "Entities from beyond the universe, drawn to our reality by the light of consciousness itself. And they came to consume everything the progenitors had built. The progenitors fought them," the Vigil continued. "A war that lasted for millennia, and slowly they pushed the hollow back toward the void from which they came. But the cost was beyond measure." "They won?" Elena asked hopefully. "They sacrificed themselves," the Vigil answered. "Every ship, every world, every living progenitor sailed into the darkness to seal the hollow away, knowing they would never return, and before they left, they reset the Earth to its beginning and planted the seeds of new life. They knew that one day their descendants would rise again, and they left Prometheus behind to wait for you, to guide you, and to prepare you for what must come." Morrison's face had gone pale. "Prepare us for what?" The Vigil raised her hand, and a map of the galaxy appeared around them, with a dark stain spreading from the edges. "The seal is weakening," she said, "and the hollow are beginning to return, and according to my calculations, their vanguard will reach the galaxy within the next 100 years. Silence filled the chamber as the weight of her words settled upon them. "The species that mock you, the civilizations that call you primitive," the Vigil said. "They have forgotten who they are and where they came from, and they have grown soft in their comfort and complacency. But you have not forgotten," she continued, looking at Elena and Morrison and all the humans gathered in the chamber. "You still struggle. You still fight. You still know what it means to face darkness and refuse to surrender. This ship is gene-locked to human DNA," the Vigil explained. "No other species in the galaxy can operate it. And the technology it contains is beyond anything the current galactic powers have ever imagined." She gestured at the crystalline throne. "Weapons that fold space itself. Shields that exist outside of time. engines that move through dimensions rather than through the void. All of this is your inheritance, your birthright, and your responsibility. Elena walked toward the throne as if drawn by invisible strings. And when she placed her hand upon the crystal, the entire ship seemed to hum with awakening power. The progenitors believed in you, the vigil said softly. They gave everything they had so that you might one day exist. And they trusted that when the darkness returned, their children would be ready to face it. Can we actually do this? Elena asked. Her voice barely a whisper. I do not know, the vigil admitted. But I know that your ancestors thought you could. And I know that the galaxy will need you whether it wants to admit it or not. General Morrison straightened his shoulders. And in that moment, he looked less like a military officer and more like something far older. Then we have work to do, he said. And not much time to do it. The vigil smiled. And for the first time in 4 billion years, hope flickered in her ancient eyes. Then let us begin. Outside the ship, the Antarctic wind howled across the ice, and the world above went on with its ordinary concerns. Unaware that everything had changed in a chamber buried beneath the frozen south, humanity had been given an inheritance beyond imagination. And the galaxy was about to learn that the species it had dismissed as primitive carried the blood of gods in their veins. 20 years passed like water through open fingers, and the world above the ice continued its ordinary dance of politics and conflict and daily struggle. Completely unaware of what was being built in the darkness below, the governments of Earth had been united by necessity, brought together by the shared secret of Prometheus and the terrible knowledge of what was coming. And though they still argued and competed on the surface, beneath that surface they worked as one. Elena Vasquez, now Director Vasquez, stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched through view screens as another human-built warship completed its final tests. In the vast cavern they had hollowed beneath Antarctica, the Defiance is ready for deployment, reported Captain Chun Wei, a woman who had risen through the ranks of the unified Earth Defense Force and proven herself worthy of command. That makes 17 capital ships and over 200 support vessels. Still not enough, Elena said quietly, but it will have to do. The vigil's holographic form flickered into existence beside her. The galactic observers continue to report that Earth remains a primitive backwater, she said with something like amusement. Their satellites see only what we allow them to see. Let them watch, Elena replied. Let them laugh and congratulate themselves on their superiority, because when the time comes, their arrogance will be their greatest weakness. She did not have to wait long for that time to arrive. The Vareshi Empire had grown bored with the slow process of galactic politics, and their new emperor had decided that expansion was the cure for all domestic troubles. And Earth primitive, defenseless, laughable Earth seemed like the perfect target. The Vareshi battle group emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. 47 warships bristling with weapons that could crack moons and boil oceans, and at their head sailed the Imperial Fury. Flagship of the Vareshi Third Fleet Admiral Korth stood on the command deck of the Imperial Fury, his scaled hide gleaming with the oils of victory he had applied that morning. And he smiled with all 3 rows of teeth as Earth appeared on his view screen. Open a channel to the planet, he commanded, and let these primitives know their masters have arrived. His communications officer obeyed, and Korth's voice boomed across every frequency on Earth. Attention, species of the third planet, he announced. I am Admiral Korth of the Vareshi Empire, and I come to offer you the honor of serving our glorious civilization. You will surrender all governmental authority to our representatives, provide tribute in the form of resources and labor, and accept your new status as a client species of the Empire. You have 6 hours to comply, and if you do not, We will begin eliminating your population centers one by one until you understand the wisdom of obedience." He closed the channel and settled back into his command throne with satisfaction. "Send the observation data to the Council Relay," he ordered, "and let the other species watch how the Varshi handle primitives across the galaxy." The Galactic Council gathered around their view screens to witness what they assumed would be a quick and unremarkable conquest. And many of them felt a twinge of pity for the doomed humans. Though not enough to actually intervene, Ambassador Valeth watched with mild interest, wondering if humanity would surrender immediately or put up some amusing resistance first. 5 hours and 50 minutes passed on the bridge of the Imperial Fury. Admiral Korth grew impatient. "They have not responded," his communications officer reported. "Perhaps their technology is too primitive to receive our transmission." Korth snorted. "Target their largest population center and prepare a demonstration strike, as that should motivate them to find a way to communicate." His weapons officer began the targeting sequence. An energy gathered in the forward batteries of the Imperial Fury. Then the Antarctic ice split open. The Prometheus rose from the earth, like a god awakening from ancient slumber. 12 kilometers of impossible architecture wreathed in golden light and geometries that made Varshi sensors scream with confusion on the bridge of the Imperial Fury. Admiral Korth stared at his view screen with all three eyes wide in disbelief. "What is that?" he demanded. But none of his officers could answer. The Prometheus spoke, and its voice carried across every channel in the system, across every relay in the sector, all the way to the chamber of the Galactic Council itself. "This world is under the protection of the Terran continuity," the voice announced. "Ancient and powerful and utterly without fear. You have threatened our children, and you have 6 minutes to withdraw your forces. If you do not comply, we will demonstrate why the progenitors were feared throughout the cosmos." In the council chamber, Ambassador Valeth had gone completely still, her scales pale with sudden terror. "Progenitors," Elder Vorn whispered, his crystalline form flickering with shock. "That is not possible." Admiral Korth recovered his composure and laughed. Though the sound was hollow, "a bluff," he declared. "A primitive trick to frighten us with ancient legends." He raised his hand. "All ships, open fire on that vessel immediately." The Varshi fleet unleashed everything they had: plasma cannons, particle beams, antimatter torpedoes, weapons that had cracked worlds and shattered civilizations. And the combined fire of 47 warships struck the Prometheus in a blinding cascade of destruction. When the light cleared, the Prometheus remained exactly where it had been, completely untouched. The weapon's fire had not been deflected or absorbed. It had simply ceased to exist the moment it touched the shimmering barrier that surrounded the ancient ship. "What?" Korth breathed. The Prometheus returned fire. A single beam of light emerged from its forward array. But this was not light, as any species in the galaxy understood it. This was light that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Light that reached through space and time and probability itself. The beam touched the Imperial Fury, and the Imperial Fury was gone, not destroyed, not vaporized, not blown apart, simply removed from existence as if it had never been, leaving behind nothing but empty space where 40,000 Varshi soldiers had been a moment before the beam swept across the rest of the fleet in a single graceful arc. And then there was silence. The entire Varshi battle. Group 47 warships, over 1 million soldiers. The pride of the Varshi Third Fleet had vanished in less than 3 seconds. In the council chamber, Ambassador Valeth sat down heavily, her legs no longer able to support her weight. Elder Vorn's crystalline form had gone dark with shock. The Kethmari delegate, who had once compared human weapons to throwing rocks, was making a sound that his species made only in the presence of death. The view screen showed the Prometheus hanging in space above Earth, golden light pulsing along its surface. And somehow every being in the galaxy who watched knew that they were looking at something far older and far more powerful than anything they had ever imagined. The humans, the primitives, the laughingstocks, the species they had dismissed as children playing with sticks, stood revealed as something else entirely, and the Galactic Council, for the first time in 10,000 years, had absolutely nothing to say. The galactic community did not sleep that night, and on 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and size stared at their view screens and tried to understand what they had witnessed. The Warship Empire demanded justice and vengeance, but their demands grew quieter and quieter as the hours passed. And eventually, they fell silent entirely when the Prometheus began transmitting data packets to every inhabited world in the galaxy. These are the progenitor historical archives, the transmission explained, and they contain the true history of every species in this galaxy, a history that has been forgotten for millions of years. Ambassador Valith watched the data unfold on her personal screen, and what she saw made her scales lose all color. The Sereni had not evolved naturally. They had been uplifted by the progenitors from simple reptilian creatures, given intelligence and guidance, and left behind as caretakers of knowledge. The archive showed her ancestors receiving gifts of technology and wisdom, being taught the principles of science and mathematics, bowing before beings that looked almost human. "We were servants," she whispered. "We were created to serve them." Across the galaxy, similar revelations were unfolding. The Kethmari, who prided themselves on their ancient warrior culture, learned that they had been designed as builders and engineers. Their aggression, a mutation that emerged only after the progenitors departed. The Vrelian observers discovered that their gift for manipulation had originally been a talent for diplomacy, twisted over millennia into something darker. And the Warship Empire, the proud conquerors who had tried to enslave humanity, learned the most humiliating truth of all gardeners. The Warship ambassador read from the archives, his voice hollow. "We were uplifted to tend the gardens of new worlds and prepare them for future species. And we were never meant to be warriors." Every elder race carried progenitor genes in their blood, diluted over millions of years of separation, but still present, still marking them as children of a civilization they had completely forgotten, and humanity. The species they had mocked as primitive and violent and unworthy humanity carried those genes undiluted, pure, exactly as the progenitors had intended. The council sent their summons within days. The species known as humanity will present themselves before the full assembly. The message read, to answer for their actions and explain their origins. Director Vasquez considered sending a fleet, considered making a demonstration of strength that would cow the council into silence. But in the end, she chose a different path. She sent one woman in a single shuttle, Captain Chen. Wei walked into the great chamber of the Galactic Council alone, her footsteps echoing in the vast space as 947. Delegations watched in silence. She wore the simple uniform of the Earth Defense Force, unadorned except for a single patch showing a golden sunburst, the symbol of the Terran continuity. The council president, a Vrelian elder whose face tentacles hung limp with exhaustion, spoke first. "You will explain yourself," he demanded. Though his voice lacked its usual authority, "You will explain how your primitive species came to possess such technology, and you will explain why you concealed this from the galactic community." Chun Wei looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who had laughed at humanity just months before. And when she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. "You called us primitive," she said. "You watched us struggle and fight and suffer, and you laughed at our warships and our weapons and our violent nature. And perhaps, by your standards, we were primitive, because we had not yet learned to travel between stars or build cities in the clouds or live for thousands of years. But we remembered something that you had forgotten." She began to walk forward, And with each step, the delegates seemed to shrink back in their seats. We remembered what it means to struggle, to fight against impossible odds, to look at darkness and refuse to surrender. Your ancestors knew this too, she continued. Before comfort made you soft and complacency made you blind, before you forgot that you were once like us. She stopped at the center of the chamber and did something that no representative had done in 10,000 years of council history. She remained standing while addressing the assembly. The progenitors did not abandon you, Chen Wei said, her voice rising. They sacrificed themselves to protect you. Every last one of them sailing into the void to seal away an enemy that would have consumed everything. They died for you, and you forgot them. And you became exactly what they feared you might become. Children who mistake comfort for strength and age for wisdom. She raised her hand, and a holographic display activated at the center of the chamber, showing the void between galaxies, showing shapes of darkness drifting ever closer. The Hollow are returning, Chen Wei announced. The enemy that the progenitors gave everything to defeat is breaking through the seal. And within a century, they will reach this galaxy. Gasps and cries of fear rippled through the assembly. When they come, they will not care about your politics or your pride or your ancient grudges, because they will consume everything, every world, every species, every memory of everything you have ever been. She turned slowly, looking at each delegation in turn. You can spend the time you have left mocking us and demanding explanations. Or you can remember who you were before you forgot. We are going to fight, Chen Wei declared. With or without you, we are going to stand against the darkness, because that is who we are. And that is what the progenitors made us to do. The only question is whether you will stand with your family, or whether you will cower in your comfortable palaces, while your children face the end alone. The chamber was utterly silent. Ambassador Valeth rose slowly from her platform. Her scales flushed with emotion, and when she spoke, her voice trembled. I remember now, she said. I remember the old stories. The ones we told children before we decided they were just myths. The stories about the firstborn who sailed in the darkness to save us all. I remember. And I am ashamed. She stepped down from her platform and walked to stand beside Chen Wei. The Serenity Collective stands with humanity, she announced. We stand with our family. One by one, other delegates rose from their seats. The Kathmari delegate, his massive frame moving with unexpected grace, descended to join them. We were builders, he rumbled, and we will build again. We will build weapons and ships and walls to hold back the darkness. Elder Vorn's crystalline form blazed with renewed light. The Ascended remember, he said. We remember the progenitors, and we remember what we owe them. Within minutes, hundreds of delegates had left their platforms to stand with the human ambassador, and those who remained in their seats looked increasingly isolated and ashamed. The council president stared at the gathering crowd below, and slowly, painfully, he rose from his throne and descended to join them. What do you need from us? He asked. His voice humble in a way it had never been before. Chen Wei smiled. And in that smile was the warmth of a family reunion millions of years overdue. We need you to remember, she said. Remember who you are, remember who made you. And remember that you were never meant to face the darkness alone. We are all children of the progenitors, she continued. And together, we might just survive what is coming. Outside the great chamber, the galaxy began to change, and species that had been enemies for millennia reached out to each other with trembling hands, rediscovering bonds that had been buried for millions of years. The humans had not just awakened a warship beneath the ice. They had awakened something far more powerful. They had awakened hope. 10 years of preparation had transformed the galaxy in ways that would have seemed impossible before humanity's awakening. And now the combined fleet of the Galactic Alliance gathered at the edge of known space. ready to face an enemy that had haunted the cosmos since before time had meaning. Over 15,000 warships from dozens of species hung in formation around the Prometheus, their hulls retrofitted with progenitor technology that humanity had shared freely with all who asked, and their crews trained for a battle that none of them truly understood. Fleet Admiral Chen Wei stood on the command deck of the Prometheus, her hair now streaked with gray, but her eyes still sharp and fierce. And beside her flickered the holographic form of the Vigil. "They are coming," the Vigil announced, her ancient voice tight with something that might have been fear. "The hollow vanguard is emerging from the void. Approximately 3 million units." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Chen Wei opened a channel to the entire fleet, and her face appeared on view screens across thousands of ships, where beings of every shape and size waited for her words. "I know what you are feeling right now," she said. "I know the fear that sits in your chest like a stone, because I feel it too. The enemy we face today is not like any enemy we have fought before, because they are not creatures of this universe, and they do not understand mercy or surrender or peace. They come only to consume, to devour everything we have built and everything we are. And they will not stop until there is nothing left." She paused, and when she continued, her voice was softer. "My ancestors built this ship 4 billion years ago, and they knew when they sailed into the darkness that they would never return. But they went anyway because they believed their children deserved a chance. Every species in this fleet carries that legacy in their blood. The gift of the progenitors who loved us so much that they gave everything so we might one day exist. Today, we prove that their sacrifice was not in vain." She straightened her shoulders. "Today, we prove that we were worth believing in." The fleet responded with a roar of defiance that echoed across the communication channels, voices in 100 languages crying out with renewed courage. And for a moment, the fear was forgotten. Then the hollow emerged from the void, and the fear returned. They were not ships in any sense that the word could describe. They were absences, holes in reality where light and matter and meaning simply ceased to exist. And they moved through space like shadows spreading across a wall. 3 million of them, a tide of nothingness that stretched across the stars. And at the center of that tide pulsed something even darker. A presence so vast and so wrong that sensors could not even begin to measure it. "The Hollow Prime," the Vigil whispered, "the heart of their swarm. The entity that leads them all. If we destroy that," Chen Wei asked, "then the rest will scatter and retreat," the Vigil answered. "But reaching it will cost us dearly." Chen Wei nodded slowly. "Then we pay the price." She raised her hand. "All ships, advance." The Galactic Alliance surged forward, and the battle for the galaxy began. The fighting was like nothing any of them had experienced. Weapons fire disappearing into the hollow without effect. Ships being torn apart by enemies that could not be seen until it was too late. Chaos and destruction spreading across the battlefield like wildfire. But the progenitor technology made a difference. Shields held where they should have failed. Weapons found their marks when they should have missed. And slowly, painfully, the Alliance began to push forward. The Prometheus led the charge, its ancient weapons singing a song of defiance as it carved a path through the hollow swarm. And behind it came the ships of every species in the galaxy, fighting together as one family for the first time in millions of years. Admiral Valith commanded the Sereni contingent from the bridge of her flagship, her scales blazing with battle fury as she directed her ships against a hollow cluster that had been threatening the Alliance flank. For the progenitors, she screamed, and her weapons' fire tore through the enemy like light through shadow. The Kethmari builders had constructed massive siege vessels that anchored the Alliance formation, their heavy guns providing covering fire as smaller ships darted. Through the chaos, Elder Vorn and the Ascended had merged their consciousness into a single. blazing entity that reached out across the battlefield, disrupting the Hollow's coordination and creating openings for the Alliance to exploit. And everywhere, human ships fought alongside their galactic siblings, the descendants of the progenitors, leading from the front as they had promised. But the cost was terrible. Ships vanished by the hundreds, consumed by the Hollow or torn apart by the impossible forces they wielded. And each loss was felt across the fleet like a wound. "We are losing too many," the Vigil reported, her voice strained. "At this rate, we will not reach the Hollow Prime before our forces are exhausted." Chun Wei stared at the tactical display, watching the lights that represented Alliance ships wink out one by one. And she made a decision. "Take us in," she ordered. "Full speed, straight at the Prime. And tell the fleet to follow in our wake." "Admiral," the Vigil warned, "the probability of survival is less than 3%. "I know," Chun Wei said. "But the progenitors faced worse odds when they sealed the Hollow away the first time. And they did not hesitate." She opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, form up behind the Prometheus. Because we are going to punch through to the heart of this swarm and end this once and for all. Some of us will not survive," she continued. "But our children will, and their children after them. And that is worth any price we have to pay." The fleet responded instantly, ships falling into formation behind the ancient dreadnought. And together, they surged toward the darkness at the center of the Hollow swarm. The next hour was a blur of fire and shadow and desperate courage. Ships sacrificing themselves to clear the path forward. Crews fighting to the last breath to buy their comrades another minute of life. But finally, impossibly, they broke through. The Prometheus emerged into a clear space at the heart of the swarm. And before them pulsed the Hollow Prime, a void so deep and so hungry that it seemed to drink in the light of the stars themselves. "Target locked," the Vigil announced. "Weapons charged and ready." Chun Wei took a deep breath. "Fire everything." The Prometheus unleashed its full fury. Weapons that had been designed by the greatest minds the universe had ever known, wielded by the descendants of those same minds against the enemy that had haunted their ancestors. The beam struck the Hollow Prime, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the void began to crack. Lines of golden light spreading across its surface like dawn breaking over a darkened world. And the Hollow Prime screamed, a sound that was felt rather than heard. A scream of rage and hunger, and something almost like surprise. The light grew brighter and brighter, and the Hollow Prime shattered across the battlefield. The remaining Hollow units froze, their coordination broken, and then they began to retreat, fleeing back toward the void between galaxies. The Alliance fleet, battered and broken but still fighting. "Let them go," Chun Wei slumped in her command chair, exhaustion washing over her like a wave. And around her the bridge crew was crying and laughing and embracing each other. "We did it," someone said, their voice choked with emotion. The Vigil's holographic form flickered with something that might have been tears. "The progenitors would be proud," she said softly. "They would be so proud of all of you." Chun Wei nodded slowly. "Open a channel to the fleet." Her face appeared on view screens across thousands of surviving ships, where beings of every species looked at her with exhaustion and grief and joy. "The Hollow are defeated," she said simply. "Not forever, because they will return one day. But we have bought ourselves time. Time to prepare. Time to grow stronger. Time to become what the progenitors always knew we could be. We have lost many friends today, and we will mourn them. But we will also remember what they fought for. They fought for a galaxy where every species stands together, where the children of the progenitors remember that they are family, and where the darkness knows that it will never triumph." She smiled, and in that smile was all the warmth and strength and stubborn defiance that made humanity what it was. "Today, we proved that our ancestors were right to believe in us, In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy began the long process of healing and rebuilding, and the Galactic Council was reformed with humanity taking its rightful place at the table, not as newcomers, but as the eldest children, returned at last to guide their siblings. The entry for humanity in the Great Archives was quietly amended. The classification, Category 7 Primitive, struck from the record forever. In its place stood a single word that carried the weight of 4 billion years of hope and sacrifice and love progenitor, and across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, the children of the firstborn looked up at the stars and remembered who they were, where they came from, and what they were meant to become. The darkness would return one day, but when it did, it would find a family waiting, united and strong, and ready to face whatever came, because that was what the progenitors had made them for, and they would not fail.